Alrighty, so hopefully you should all sort of see me now and you should hear me. So thank you so much for joining. I can see that the chat room has been busy, people posting that they're coming from all over the place. We've got somebody down in Devon, I think I know who that is, somebody in Nebraska, we've got Belgium, Sweden, all over the place. So folks, thank you so much for joining. Wherever you heard about this from, it's lovely that you've decided to join me this evening, or this morning, or this afternoon, depending on where you are. But yeah, we've got quite a lot to go through. We're going to go through some retouching, some portrait retouching using Lightroom. There's a lot to cover. I'm going to kind of go through it step by step. Don't worry about not getting all of it. Obviously, you'll know that later on, those of you watching now, you'll be able to get like a replay at some point, so you'll be able to go through it. And also, I'm going to explain how you can get hold of the files that I use, because it's all right you sitting there and watching this, but there's nothing better than doing it actually for real. So I'll show you at some point as we go through this where you can get hold of the raw files so that you can go and do the retouching that you see me doing right now. But before we kick off, just got to say very much a big thank you to both Lumeska and to Calibrite for actually putting this on. And this is also being done in partnership with Wex. And talking of Wex, I know at some point, I can't say when, but I know at some point, there will be some kind of a discount code that Wex have set up specifically for this webinar. So keep an eye on that. You're going to see a few things kind of popping up on the screen at some point, I'm sure, but that'll happen at some stage during this particular webinar. Also, there will be a couple of polls or surveys to make it more clear. I'm going to drop some of those in as we go through and a couple of other little things to mention as well. But let me just share my screen now. I want to kind of dive over to show you the kind of stuff that we're going to go through. So you should now see my screen, and you also see me to one side probably. But if I dive over to my Lightroom, this is my Lightroom community profile page, and I'll explain more about that later on. But the portraits I'm going to go through, we've got this one here. See me hovering over it. You can see the before and the after as I do it. I'm going to take you through that one because that's actually quite an old portrait of mine that I did a while, maybe 5 years ago, something like that. That originally I retouched using both Lightroom and Photoshop, and it was a black and white. I kind of liked it being black and white, but more recently, if any of you out there have been following me for the last sort of couple of months or so, you'll know that I've been really kind of diving in to see what I can do only within Lightroom and trying to limit myself from going into Photoshop if it's at all possible. And what's amazing is, as I'm pushing myself to do that, there's things I'm able to now do in Lightroom that I only thought would have been possible in Photoshop. Now, I know as time's going on, more and more is being added into Lightroom, and it's inevitable that there'll be times when we don't need to go into Photoshop, but it's incredible now when you really do kind of force yourself not to go into Photoshop to do what you would ordinarily comfortably do over there, but instead kind of diving down into the depths of what you've got within Lightroom. It's amazing. It really is amazing what you can do. So hopefully you'll get to see some of that this evening. As I go through it. But anyway, that's one portrait we're going to go through. I'm going to go through that one first, but I'm also going to go through this one in the top left hand here. This is my friend Anthony, who I've noticed is in the chat room. He's there as well. I don't think he was expecting this, but I'm going to go through this portrait here, which is one I only took yesterday. And it's a new style of portrait that I'm doing using a different focal length and also using some LED lights. So that's what we're going to go through. But let me dive over to my where we're going to get this just here. Let's just open this image up. Now, one thing I'm going to do, I can see already, obviously, that the chat is very active. I just want to ask you a question and put your answer in the chat as we're going through this. But if there was one feature in Lightroom that you wish was in there right now, what would it be? What do you wish would be in Lightroom right now? Now, obviously, there's two versions of Lightroom. We've got Lightroom Desktop, which everyone sort of thought of as being called, you know, Lightroom on the cloud. It's already very confusing at one stage, but Lightroom Desktop, and we've got Lightroom Classic, and Classic is the one that's been around the longest. Lightroom Desktop is the new kid on the block, or the newish kid on the block. But just post in there what you think would be if you could wish for one thing to be in there right now, what would it be? And it'd be interesting for me to find that, and I explain why I'm asking that right towards the end. But now, before we get into the retouching side of it, obviously a part of this webinar was mentioning how you can get a color accurate workflow, and that is vitally important, maybe more so if you've got like a number of images from one particular shoot where you need to retouch them to be, you know, a very, very similar look across all the images. So you're going to need to have a very similar starting point for every one of those images. So color accuracy is going to be vitally important. But also color accuracy when it comes to, just single images, like what I'm going to go through now. But I do have a confession to make. The portrait that you're going to see me go through now, I didn't use one of these things here. And this is what I want to just quickly talk about. This is called a color checker passport. Obviously, it's made by Calibrite. It's a number of different colored squares on there. And this we can use, I'm not going to say to get perfect colors. I'm going to say to get accurate colors. And what I've got is I've got a video to show you, because I haven't got like a behind the scenes stuff of this particular portrait here, but I've got a video to show you from a different event that I was actually presenting for, but I included this to show how you can use this color checker. So for those of you who don't know, this will be worth looking at. So let me just dive over to where we've got our video. This is about 8 minutes long, and then we're going to dive into the retouching. So let me just play this video for you right now.
So I just wanted to share something extra with you, and it's actually something that, believe it or not, I forgot to do in the photo shoot that you've just been watching, and that was to use one of these little devices here. If I just open this up, that's called a color checker passport. It's made by Calibrite, and it's basically a number of calibrated colored squares and different tones of dark gray through to white that we can use when we're taking a photograph to then use later on in Lightroom to make sure that we get as accurate color as possible. And that's what we want for the very start of our retouching that we can then work on. It's especially important if you're doing a series of images to know that every single one that you retouch from that series has the exact same starting point when it comes to the colors. So the way we use this, like I said, if I just show you on my screen here, here's the actual final retouch picture that I use this one for. But if I show you here, this is at the very, very start of the actual photo shoot here, where my friend Anthony is holding the color checker passport. So you can see here, he's holding it just on the outsides so that his fingers aren't encroaching on any of these kind of markings that are built into the color checker. They're really important because the software needs to analyze and it needs to recognize where these markers are. But basically, he's holding it in a normal position, flat up towards his body, where the camera is pointing straight at him. So he's not, if the light's off to one side, he doesn't hold it towards the light. He holds it towards the camera so we get the light hitting it just as the light is hitting him. Then what we do, once we've done that and we've finished our photo shoot, we then need to use this picture here. We don't need to crop in tight at all, but we need to then use this software in the software that we can get to use with this. And I'll link this software in the workbook, but basically you download it from Calibrite, and it's the color checker passport software. For it to work, it needs to have a DNG rather than a regular RAW file coming out of whatever camera you're using, because obviously different cameras, there's different file formats. So like for my Sony, it's ARW. For Canon, it's CRW. For Nikon, it's NEF. We need to give it a DNG so that the software can then create a profile. And that profile will then lay down the colors as accurate as they should be, because it'll correct what it gets put into it, which is this picture here, and it knows exactly what color values each of those squares should be. So it'll create a profile that corrects those colors so that they know they then become exactly what they should be. So first of all then, here's the raw file that I took of Anthony at the beginning of the photo shoot, and if I press I on my keyboard, you can see here, it is a RAW file, but it's in the ARW, the Sony format. So I need to export it, first of all, from Lightroom onto my desktop. That's where I'm going to put it. So I'll go to the button at the top right here, click on Custom Settings. The image type, I'm going to choose DNG, and I'll just choose we'll go for the original name, something like that, and then we'll click on Export. It'll ask me where I want to export it to, and I'll just put it onto my desktop and then click on Export. All right, so now that's done, let's now dive onto my desktop. Let's just minimize Lightroom and get rid of that there. There's the DNG file. So now what I'll do is I'll open up the Calibrite Color Checker Camera Calibration Software, which is what you can see here. And you can see that it says to drag and drop a DNG image here. Now, when you first open this software, you will get a little warning come up to say that make sure that your screen has been calibrated. If it's older than 30 days, then think about doing another calibration, just so that you know that the profile, the screen, everything all syncs in, so all the colors are looking good across everything. But I've done that. So here now then, I've got the software open, the color checker camera calibration software. There's the DNG. I'm literally going to drag it and drop it and release it into there. You'll see now that it says loading image, and this can take a little while, but I'll just kind of leave this running in real time so that we can see how long it's going to take for it to create that DNG, that profile. What we can do then, once it's actually created it, in fact, there you go. Let's analyze, see how it's analyzed it, and it can recognize each of the individual squares, which is pretty cool. And that's because we didn't sort of cover over any of these markers. So it knows exactly where it needs to look. So we'll just click on Create Profile. And there you go. Fantastic. What I will do is I'm going to just put that on my desktop. So we'll go Sony, the color profile. I'll click on Save. There we go. That'll just do that. Creating the profile. We should see it then arrive any second once it's created it. And then we're going to import that into Lightroom. Now, if you're a Lightroom Classic user, there's actually a plugin that you get that you can install into Lightroom Classic, and you can do this within Lightroom Classic. But this is the way that we're going to do this with, currently do it with Lightroom. So it says here that the profile's been created. I'll click OK. And there we see it on my desktop, the profile. All right, so now the profile's been created. What I need to do is go to the profile browser, then go to these three dots in the upper right-hand corner, this ellipsis, click on those, and at the very bottom we have Import Profiles. So I'll click on that, then navigate to the desktop where I've actually exported the profile to from that software, click on it and import. Now, at the moment you'll notice it's nowhere to be seen. So what we need to do is just close Lightroom. Then I just reopen it. And then when I go back into the edit section and the profile browser, you can now see we have a new folder here called Profile. So I'll open that up and here it is. So if I put my cursor over it, look what happens to the main image just here. Put it over in real time, we see how those colors are now being corrected. So now we've got much more accurate colors. You can really see the difference it's making, especially on the blues. Look, as I come over, look at the difference just there. So that software now has corrected the colors from the raw file to now be what they should be, because it knew exactly what each of those color values were and it's corrected them. So what I'll do is I'll click on it to commit it. We'll go back, then I'll go to the color section, choose the white balance tool. So now we'll just get the color temperature of the image correct. So I'll click on one of the gray squares just here, this mid one here. So we've got mid gray, tap on that, and there you go. So if I now do before and after, before and after. So at this stage, we've now got a couple of choices. We can either create a preset that stores the profile and the white balance, which we can then use later on, or we can just simply copy the settings and then sync them across the other images from that particular photo shoot. And that's what I'll do. So I'll go to the ellipsis at the bottom on the right here, and I'll choose Copy Edit Settings. Then let's just go to some of the other images from that photo shoot. Let's say these 5 images just here. So I'll click on the first one, hold the Shift key down, and click on the far right one. So they're all now highlighted, and I'll just right click, and I will choose Paste Edit Settings. And look what happens here. You'll notice change made to all of these images. So Paste Edit Settings, we click on that, and very quickly there the color change has been done. So now each of these images have much more accurate color to what they did originally in the original raw file. So look, if I do before and after, let's go to another one. Let's just choose this one here. We'll do before and after. So that is how you can use one of these color checker passports to get much more accurate colors, which is a great thing to do when you've got a number of images from that particular shoot, so that when you edit them, you start off at exactly the same point.
Well, there you go. That is how you use that color checker, which I hasten to add, I didn't use on this photo shoot because I wasn't really using one then. Had I got one, I would have used it. But let's now take you through this retouch here then, because obviously I'm talking about not having had that color checker. So I need to retouch this image to get the colors how I want them to be, because this is the out of camera, the raw image. And again, just to remind you how I want it to look, if I go back to my community page here on Lightroom, this is how I want the actual image to look. If I just load that in, and you'll see it just there. So quite a difference between the two. Right, so let me just go back to here, and let's look how we'll do. So first things first then, profiles. You know, I mentioned about the profiles there. That's what the color checker would have given me. But I'm going to go in the top right-hand corner here where we have the profile section. Mine by default is set to go to Adobe Color. Every time I bring a raw file in, it'll just be set to Adobe Color. But that obviously doesn't look good for me at the moment. So I'm going to click on Browse All Profiles. As I'm doing this as well, just made me think to say this, you'll notice that I'm using Lightroom Desktop, which we used to think of as calling Lightroom CC or Lightroom on the, you know, Lightroom Web or whatever. What I'm going to go through, you can do exactly the same in Lightroom Classic. I just prefer to use Lightroom Desktop now. It just seems to suit my workflow a lot better because it syncs across all my other devices. And now obviously we have local storage. It's not just cloud-based now. That for me was the thing that tipped me over to want to use this a lot better, a lot more. So, right, somebody's saying, okay, right, so let's have a look then. So here's the Adobe RAW profiles, and some of them look quite good. One I'd probably think of going to initially would be Adobe Neutral. And you can see there, makes a big difference to it. It kind of flattens it out, you get a lot more detail. But certainly on my screen, my calibrated screen, as I'm looking at this, it looks a little bit milky. It's not really something that I want to have. And if I use a profile that gives me that kind of look, I've then got to really work to kind of correct it. So that's not what I want to have. But I'm going to go down to another folder here. If I just close that, there's one here. Lightroom has recognized what camera I'm using, which for this shoot was a Sony a7R IV. So it's got a camera matching folder. If Lightroom doesn't recognize it, you would see this folder. But there's a number of different ones in here. We've got the neutral one, this portrait one. Now, when I hover over it, you know, when you first look at it, well, that's not really doing me, you know, it's a very orange. It doesn't look good at all. However, it's the detail that I'm more interested in because I know I can correct that orange very, very easy. So I can see as I bring it over there, there's a lot more detail, certainly on the model's hands. You can see much more detail in those gloves, on the bag, and certainly in the shadow areas, you know, the detail's looking good. And, you know, in the back side of a kind of a hair just there as well. So I'm going to go for the camera matching portrait profile. That's the first thing I'll do. So that's what would give me the colors, but now I need to sort out the color temperature. So I'll then come back out of there and I'll go to the color section where we have the white balance tool just here. And I'm just going to click on it. And as luck would have it, and it is lucky, I was actually using a gray background. So I'm going to click anywhere on this background here because it's going to be a gray and it's going to get that kind of ballpark for what I would want. But bearing in mind as well, I am going to do a little bit of a tweak to the colors anyway. All right. So just click on it and we can give that just there. So already just with 2 clicks, quite a big difference. And if I press the backslash key on my keyboard, we can see the before and after. So we've got before and after, before and after. Now, this picture here, there's a certain way that I want to retouch this because it's got that kind of sort of late 1940s, early 1950s kind of theme. And if we look at pictures from that era, they weren't quite so contrasty. And that's the kind of look that I want to give this one here. So I'm going to go first of all up into the light section. Let's just bring my trackpad over a little bit. And I'm going to first of all just go to the contrast. I'm going to lower contrast. I don't want it to be quite so contrasty. And when I do that, you can see straight away we start to get a little bit more detail in there anyway. So I'll take it down to around about 20-ish. And again, you'll be able to see all of these settings when I show you that file later on and how you can get it. So -20 on that. Shadows, let's just bring up some shadow detail, just a little bit. And there's no hard and fast rule with this. This is purely your taste, what you want this to be like. So I'm going to go bring up the shadow detail. Highlights are looking okay. Let's just take that back and forth. I might just bring the highlight down just a touch, somewhere like that. And the blacks, let's just go for the blacks. I can take the blacks over to the right to increase them there so I can bring even more detail in as well. I don't want it to be completely flat, but I do want to bring it up so that I get even more detail. So probably somewhere around about there will look good. The temperature and the tint, I'm not going to touch, obviously, because that's what I did when I did, first of all, profile and also the target with the white balance, when I sort of click down on that. But her skin tone does look a little bit orange. If I just zoom in, you can see her skin tone is just a little bit orange. And one of the most powerful things that I absolutely love in Lightroom is the color mixer. Whenever I've got images that I do grading on. I know we have the color grading section, but there's so much that I do within this color mixer section here, because we can control individually the overall color, the hue, the saturation, and the luminance by all these different colored sliders in here. And it is just so powerful. It really is. But obviously all I want to do is just reduce the orange in that picture there, certainly in her skin. So I'm going to go to the saturation section. I'll take the orange slider and I'll bring it down a touch. I mean, it doesn't take much. Again, if I just zoom in on that one. Okay, so if we go before and after, you can see just a little bit, even if it's like minus 12, something like that, it just knocks enough of that orange out to make it acceptable. Might even take it just a little bit further. Let's go for minus 14, something like that. All right, okay. Next scene. Now, I noticed in the chat that there was, I think there's maybe a couple of people that said layers. They'd love to see layers within Lightroom. Now, the way I retouch, and you might see this, you'll see it in this picture, you might even see it in the next one as well, where we've got masks, the masking section within Lightroom now. And for me, I do so much in the masking section that the masks themselves, because we can have one on top of the other on top of the other, they become the layers. So it's kind of like we almost do have, masks within Lightroom when we think of how the masking section is. Very powerful indeed. But at this point, I just want to drop something else into here for you as well, because I'm just intrigued. I'm doing a bit of survey, a bit of research on you folks. I want to I'll post this one up first of all. Let's have a look at this one here. I'll keep your eyes in the chat. There's going to be a poll that appears now, and it basically says, do you agree with this statement? Let's have a look. And the statement basically says, the more that Lightroom develops and more functionality is added into it, you're enjoying not diving over back and forth between Photoshop and Lightroom. Okay, so let's just put that in and click on start on that one there. So you'll see that in. Let's have a quick look. See, dive into your poll so I can quickly check. Look, look at that. Straight, oh my, just one person said agree. Bang, went to 100%. Interesting. Okay. So yeah, I mean, it's really interesting to see that the majority, I presume you guys can see this as it's been real time, the majority there, we're looking at 81% of people who are watching this at the moment agree that they are enjoying it. They are enjoying the fact that they can stay within Lightroom without having to dive back and forth into Photoshop. So yeah, that's interesting. All right, thank you for that. There is another one I'm going to throw back in a short while, but we'll end that one just there. All right, so I mentioned masking. Let's have a look at some masking then, because I'm going to work on her eyes, and I'm also going to do some dodging and burning, which is what I would only ever have done within Photoshop. But let me just zoom in, and we're going to just work on her eyes just for a second. So we'll go to the masking section, and straight away, Lightroom starts to analyze, has this picture got any people within it? You'll see it having that little graphic analyzing it, and sure enough, there's the one person, and we get this thumbnail. If I put my cursor over it, I'll zoom out so you can see it all. You can see it highlights them all. In fact, it's a really good mask when you look at it, especially when you think there's this hair over on the left-hand side here, this loose hair look. See how it's picked it up? That's quite impressive. But then we'll click on that. Once we click on the whole person, it then breaks it down into individual masks that are going to be possible. And we can see here, as we hover over them, these different ones. Now, one other thing about the masking, it is brilliant. It really is good. It's been a huge improvement within Lightroom desktop and classic, and also the mobile versions. But what you'll notice on sometimes with the masking is that the edges of the mask can be quite defined. Now, I'm not really going to go into how we can fix that and show you how we can fix that. But one way that I tend to fix it is if I've got like an area of the face, let's say, that's a very sharp outline around it, and I'd prefer it to be softer, I'll use that mask, but then get a subtract and use a brush, really soft brush, and just go around the edge of it. And that just softens that down. It'd be nice if we didn't have to do that just yet. But for now, a bit of a workaround is just using that. A subtract or an add, get a brush, nice and soft, and brush it around the outside of that area, just to feather the edge down just a little bit. But I'm going to go for the eyes. I never whiten the eyes, but we'll go for the iris and pupil. And when I do that, we'll click on create, and it'll create a mask for me over here. It says iris and pupil. In fact, I'll just rename that one at the top there. We'll just call it eyes. And I will zoom in on this one so that we can see it a lot clearer. So let me go to 100%. Might even go a little bit closer. Let's go to 200. All right. Blimey, it's like a horror movie. There we go. So now then, we've got the mask here. These areas are kind of editing sort of things that we can do within the mask, which is why I tend to think of them really as being layers, because in Photoshop, you know, we'd have adjustment layers, and here we've got, you know, color and all stuff, just like it would be with an adjustment layer. So this is like having layers within Lightroom, I think. But let's just kind of see how we can give them a little bit more punch. So I'll increase the exposure just a touch, just a little bit. But the magic for me when I'm working on eyes is in the effects section down here. So I can add some clarity into the eyes and then use dehaze. I love using dehaze. This one here gives it some real punch just there, like that. And then just a little bit of texture, because we've got all this lovely fine detail within the eyes just here. I appreciate this is like a 3/4 length shot, but you know, might as well make the eyes look as good as we can. Not too much, because obviously they're going to be quite some far away, but I'll just add a little bit more texture onto them just well. And if I come to the masking now, if I just turn that mask off and on, it doesn't take much to make the eyes really start to pop. But I'm going to do something else on those in just a minute as well. So that's the eyes. Let me just close that down, keep this nice and tidy, and we will zoom out again. And there's something else I want to do within the masking. There's not a lot really when it comes to retouching on this image apart from the color, but it does need just a touch of dodging and burning. And like I said, ordinarily I would have been doing that within Photoshop. Let me just dive over to the chat so I can see if there's anybody got anything they need to say just there. Cool. All right. So let's have a look here. I'll go back to the masking then. I'm going to create a new mask and I'm going to go and get a brush. And what I'll do then, when we've got this brush here, we've got the brush settings over on the right-hand side. Now, for dodging and burning, I definitely want to be able to have it blend in really, really well. So I'm going to make sure that the feathering is way up at 100. We've got the flow here, which by default would be way up at 100 as well. But with dodging and burning, it's one of those things that you need to be very, very careful how you do it, in that you don't do too much, because it can very quickly, unfortunately, Amanda, I can't zoom in on this. It won't allow us to zoom in on it. But when it comes to the dodging and burning, we want to just do a little bit, take a pause, see how that looks, do a little bit more, and so on and so on. Eventually build it up to how much we want to have, rather than having the dodge and burning at full strength and just applying it. Okay, so we just need to build it up a little bit. And we can do that by using the flow setting here. And I'll take the flow down to around about 20 is kind of where I'm going to go. Now, this brush here, I'm going to use for the dodging part of the dodge and burn. So what I'll do then is I'll come to the light section and get the exposure, and I'm just going to bring this up to +1 stop. Doesn't really matter what I put it to at the moment, because this is completely non-destructive. I can adjust this at any stage later on. This is what I love about dodging and burning within Lightroom. But let me just show this then. I'll zoom in just to show you on her clothing. So I'm going to do this on her face and on her eyes. But I want to show you how this works. Let's just click and drag around. Now you can see we've got these folds in her clothing. Those are made up of highlights and shadows. That's how we know that we've got this ripple effect within the clothing. The highlight part of that ripple is what comes forward. The sort of shadow part is what goes back, i.e. the dodging forward, the burning is for back. Let me just see if I can put another little crease on her shoulder here, just, you know, again, just using Lightroom. So I'll get this dodge brush here, and I'm just going to brush down, again, at the flow of 20, and I'll just brush down and create a line there, and I'm going to go back over it. Now look, as I go over it, you'll start to see it appear. And that's because that flow is building up. See that? As I go down, it's starting to build up. And if I turn it off, see that? There it is. Now, when you're doing dodging and burning, wherever you have a highlight, just as in real, you can see that on her clothing, wherever there's a highlight, either side of it, we have a shadow. So I need to now create a burn brush. So let's just rename this brush here, first of all, so we know what's what. And I'll call this dodge. Then I'm going to go and get another brush. This is going to be my burning brush. And the great thing is when I choose another brush, the settings that here at the top, where we had the flow 100, so flow at 20, the feather at 100, it's still there. So that's great. I don't need to change those, but I do need to come down to the exposure. This time, rather than going +1 stop to brighten, I'm going to go -1 stop to darken. And again, this is flexible. It's set in stone. I can adjust these later on. But now that I've got that brush, here's my highlight going down. I'll just add a few strokes with the burn going down the side. So a couple there and a couple there. Look at that just there. All right, now I'm going to zoom out. And look, can you see that? If I just turn the masks off, keep an eye on her arm just here. There's before, after, before, after. So we can kind of fake the look of there being highlights and shadow, dodging and burning to create that contour within the actual picture. Now I need to just remove these just for a second because I'm going to show you how I want to work on dodging and burning on her face. So remove that. And what I want to do is, again, I'll zoom in. Can you see on the face here how she's got very, very prominent cheekbones and the way the cheeks are here, the way the light's hitting it. And we can see this one here, lovely cheekbone, lovely definition just on that side, but we're losing the definition just on this side here. So I need to bring out that detail just a little bit there. And I can do that just with a burn brush. And I also want to kind of darken down around the outside of the eyes just to give them a little bit more punch as well. So let me just go to the brushes. So the masking, I'll create a brush. And this one here again, feather at 100, flow at 20, and we're going to just darken this area down here. So I'll go to -1. So something like that will be fine. I might zoom in just a tad more. Let's go to 200, spacebar click and drag it across. Now this is the great thing about using this with that flow at 20. I don't need to just put it in full strength and lower it down. I can just be nice and gentle, just brush in just a little bit on there like so. All right, so let's have a look. If I go to 100, again, I'm just kind of doing this quickly in a minute, but you can kind of work on this. Whoops, moved it. There we go. We can kind of work it to bring in a little bit more definition. And this is what I mean about this being totally flexible when it comes to doing the retouching. Unlike Photoshop, we're doing dodging and burning. I can still now look on the fly. I can adjust it, just tweak it to how I want it to be. So maybe even just something like that. This isn't something that you're going to rush when you're doing this dodging and burning. You take your time doing it. But even something like that, I think, makes a difference, just so that you can see a little bit more definition in that cheek. So again, let's just turn that off. There's before and after, before and after. I think that kind of works. I think it needed it. Your choice whether you do that or not. Next thing I want to show you is just on the eyes. So I'm going to do some dodging and burning on the eyes, mainly just probably burning, but around the outside of the center of the eye is just here. The middle part we worked on great using the dehaze and the clarity and what have you. That worked great, but it's just the outside of the eyes here that I want to work on. I'll probably create another dodge and, because I'll do this on a separate layer if I was doing this dodge and burn layer. So I'll create another brush. Again, settings are going to be the same. We'll take that down to -1 stop, something like that. I might even just go in just a little bit closer. Let's go to 300. I can make the brush really small using the left square bracket key, or make it bigger using the right square bracket key. And all I'll do is just brush around the eye. And every time I go back over, it doubles up. So it's 20%, 40%. Whoops, keep moving that there. When you click on the brush, you can actually reposition it, which I don't want to do. 20%, 40%, 60%, 80%, and 100%. The more times you go over it. And look, turn that before, after, and after. Just do that with the other eye. Brush around. 2, 3, 4, 5, something like that. And then we go before, after. Again, it's less is more when it comes to retouching for definite, but it's just those little things that I like to do just to give them a little bit of a tweak. If I was going to do any dodging on here, which I could do, but I'm not going to take up too much time doing that, I would just I'd rename these layers, obviously, these masks. But let's just create another brush. This will be to lighten areas, just to give you an idea of what I would do with these eyes. Settings are all the same here. The exposure I'll take to +1. Like so. And then underneath the eyes just here, this kind of like little lip in the eyes. I'm going to brighten that up a touch. Just add that some light onto there, using that dodge on there, maybe around here, just to really help give the eyes a little bit more impact. Really subtle, but it just works. I love working on these little intricate areas like this and really get carried away with them. But if you go before, and after, something like that. So that's how I'm kind of using the dodging and burning within Lightroom. There are presets when you actually go to get a brush within Lightroom. You'll notice here, look, we've got a mask. There are presets, and we've got lighten and darken. You might think, well, why wouldn't you use those? The reason I don't use those is that the settings aren't what I want to use. So I'd have to dive in, I'd choose it, dive in, change the settings, and then carry on. It's quicker for me to just create a new brush, put the settings I want in there, and then crack on. So that's why I tend to do it that particular way. All right, so let's just zoom out now then. A couple of extra little things I want to do with it. How far have we come with this image so far? Let's press that / key. Let's come out of the skin just for a second. So before and after, before and after. The thing we'll do then is I'm going to add a little bit of a vignette. Now we do have in the effects panel, we've got like a little vignette slider, but that kind of is just like a global thing. We can't really control exactly where it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to zoom out. I'm going to go to 25%, so I can see all the way around the outside of the image there. And I will go back into the masking section. I'll create a mask to a radial gradient. And I'll just click enter and drag up like this way outside the boundaries of the image. And obviously I can reposition it. At the moment, that radial gradient is going to be whatever effects I go for, whatever adjustments I make, they're going to happen in the middle. I need it to be on the outside. So I'll just come up to the top where it says invert, and we can invert it there. So now we see the actual radial gradient is on the outside. And now I've got a lot of control where I want it to be. I can see click on these areas here just to adjust them, but I'll just leave it somewhere like that. And I'll just bring down the sides just a touch. Doesn't need to be too, doesn't need to be a lot, just a little bit, very, very subtle. Something like that will be fine. So can you see what I mean now about, the masks, how they become almost like layers within Lightroom? I just think amazing. Lightroom just completely changed for me when they brought masks in. Right, last thing I think on this image, is that the last thing? Yeah, I think, well, second to last thing. I love this. This is something I'm using more and more. And a friend of mine, Lisa Carney, put me on to using this in all sorts of different ways. But ordinarily, you'd kind of think, right, that's the image. That's, happy with it as it is. But sometimes I just like to add my own touch. It might not be your taste, but it's just something about it that I like to add in. Certainly on this image, it kind of got almost like a bit of a tilt shift lens effect. This is how you can kind of work with this. We've got the lens blur, which has recently been upgraded within Lightroom. Works an absolute treat. I'm going to first of all click on apply in there, and you'll see that it's estimating the depth to see what's focused and what isn't out of focus. And this one here is a really simple one for Lightroom to have a think about. What's in focus and what isn't. And it doesn't take long. And we can click on this little button at the bottom here that says visualize depth. And with that, what you'll see is that the dark areas that go kind of like this purpley kind of color to very dark, they're the areas that are out of focus. The bright areas, these warm areas here, and the hotter they get to the point of them being white, is what's in focus. Now, I want it to be so that this lower half here, it's just, again, just a personal creative taste of mine. I want this lower half to be just slightly out of focus. So what I'm going to do is I could maybe grab this focus range slider here, but there's not much difference. It's not really going to work for me because literally all we've got there is the model and the background. There's nothing else leading away from her that the focus could shift onto. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this refinement set here where we've got these little icons. One's focus, one says blur. So I'm going to click on the blur one. And I can increase the size of it or decrease the size of it. Left square bracket key to make it smaller, right bracket key to make it bigger. And I just want this bottom area here to focus. So I'm going to press down and brush. And you'll notice as I see how it's adding that kind of darker, the purpley kind of color. Nice and feathered. It's really, really soft. So it'll blend something like that. Again, just a personal thing. So that's now we've got the background out of focus and just this bottom area here. Let's have a look what that's given us. I'll turn off visualize depth. Takes a bit of a while for it to, there you go. So now let's zoom in. I'll go to 100, drag it up. And can you see how it's put it out of focus just a little bit? Maybe that's close there. Let's go to 66, something like that. Now, I kind of like that, just experimenting and playing around with it. But there's so much more control now rather than what it used to be. We can increase the blur or decrease it just so it's real subtle if you want to. We can also change the bokeh or the bokeh, depending on how you want to say it, where we've got these little icons here to change the kind of bokeh effect that we have. Now, these they're only really going to work, and you're going to see a difference when there is significant highlights within your image. That's when you'll really notice them. But it's nice to know they're there. But that's kind of what I wanted to do on that image. It's just, again, press that / key. There we go. There's before and after, before and after. So not many steps. If you cut out all the talking and what have you, not many steps to go from before to the after. Now, I mentioned about the fact that you can retouch this image. It'd be great to see what you want to do. You might interpret it slightly different. I want to show you how you can do that. You're going to go to my profile, my Lightroom community profile page. I'll give you the details of where that is in a second. But you can see here, there's quite a few images that I've loaded in. And what you'll notice is as you put your cursor over, each and every one of them changes to the before image and the after image, before image and after image. So here's the one there, the model we've just been working on. If I click, actually at the bottom here, can you see how it says save as preset or remix? Okay. Now, not everyone will allow you to do that, but on every single image that I have, I'm quite happy for people to be able to download the image and do some retouching on it. But if you click on the image, it'll bring it up bigger. And on the right-hand side here, look, here's every single setting that I applied so that you can see it there. So you could click to save it as a preset if you wanted to. That would be put into your Lightroom. Or you can click on Remix. If you click on Remix, it will download the before image onto your computer, into your kind of cloud. This has to be done on Lightroom desktop, by the way, so you've got to be on the cloudy kind of version. If you haven't got it, just get it. If you've got the Lightroom and the photography bundle, you've got this. So it's a good way of learning and having a bit of a play around. Click on Remix, it'll get that image into there. You can then run that through your develop module and do whatever you want to it. And you can see at the bottom, look, so many people from all over the place have done their own versions just down here. So whenever anybody plays around with it and does their own version of it, I can see that at the bottom as well. So it's interesting. It's just a great way to learn how to use Lightroom as well, because you can also go to the community tab where other people around the world upload their own images and share, this is how I did it. So you might see something, you think, that's really cool how they've done that. How on earth did they do that? Tap on the image, you'll see all the settings there. You can even press a play button and you'll see like a time lapse of how the image changes as it goes through each of the settings. So it's really, really cool stuff. So that's that. That's how you can get it. The actual address that you need for that. If I dive over to my Photoshop, let's have a look here. I think this is one. Is that it? No, not that one. Something else to show you. Not that one. Not that one. Oh, I haven't got it. I'll put it up in a second. I'll put. In fact, hold on a second. I'll put it in. I'll put it in the chat, so you've got it in the chat. How's that for quick thinking? There's my link. Let's come over to the chat. I'll post that in, so you should see this. There you go. Bosh. That is the link to my Lightroom community page, so that you can get access to all those images there and do your own retouching. But let's now move on. Next thing I want to do, Anthony. I want to look at Anthony's thing. Keep your eyes out. I don't know if that WEX code, that West discount code, I don't know if that's popped up yet, but keep an eye out. You might see it. Kate from Lamette said that actual link as well will be shared tomorrow. We'll share that with you tomorrow as well. Right, okay, let's have a look here. Let's go to this image here. This is the one of my friend Anthony that I did yesterday. Just there's the before and after. And again, you can go and get that one from that profile, get all the sort of see all the settings, whatever. But let's go through the retouch of it. Go to the local setting, and we go to Anthony, and there we go. Just a few things I want to show you on this one, because I don't want to take up too much time. Again, with this one, I didn't use the color checker, and there is a legitimate reason for it. You'll notice here, can you see how the background has got like a little bit of a bluish tint to it? Now, this was taken in the very room that I'm in now, and I can even show you behind the scenes. You might have actually told a bit as I went through them here, look. This is the behind the scenes. So this desk just here is where I'm currently sat. This is what I'm working on here. But there, Anthony was just sat there. It literally was just there. So you can see the walls in my room, which you can see behind me here, are grey. They're a grey wall. But I wanted it to have, because he had like a bluish top on, a deep blue top on, I was using these LED lights. These are lights by Westcott. They're called L60 and the L120. They're LED lights, which is what I'm using all the time now for portraits. I'm not using flash. I love constant light. It is just an absolute blessing when it comes to doing portraits. And those there, as well as the power up and down, I can change the color temperature. So I had them quite cool. So dialed right up to about 6,500 Kelvin. So it gave a little bit of a coolish kind of tint to it, which is why I've got them, got the walls looking like this. So that kind of got me a good starting point when it comes to doing the retouching on Anthony. But let me just quickly show you some of the things I did on him. This will be a shock to him as well. He did not know I was going to do this. But let me just zoom in. There was a couple of things first of all. Oh yeah, a little bit of a hair here. This little hair. Let's go to the remove section now within Lightroom, which again recently had a massive overhaul when they added in the generative AI. Now you'll see mine's ticked. Okay, I'm not going to use it for this at the moment. Just because it's there doesn't mean to say we should always use it, because it's using more. It takes more time. There's more processing, unnecessary for certain things. The remove tool on its own is really good. But let's have a look here. So I'm going to remove that hair there using the remove tool. I'll take the nice and small, the brush nice and small. I'll just brush over it like so, and then analyze it. Bang, done. This little eyebrow here, this little runaway eyebrow. There we go, eyelash rather. Take that there. Bang, done. Okay, so that's great. That works really good. And you could do much more with it than that. But let's come down to the shirt here. There's this button. Now, I'll zoom out. You can see that your eyes are drawn to it. Now, I've mentioned it. Your eyes are drawn to it. So you don't want to have that button then. I think we can kind of get rid of that so that it's not so distracting. And I'll use the remove tool. But let's have a look at how it does first of all. I'll increase the size of it. We'll be quite generous. And I'll just brush over it. I'm not using the AI. This is the simple remove tool. So give it a little while for it to analyze it. Let's just see what it does. Actually, that's not bad. That is not bad. I did not expect it to do such a good job. But the kind of like the line there where the material kind of comes in, it all of a sudden stops. So if we're going to be finicky, if we're going to be really picky about this, we might say, oh, that's not quite so good. So let's just delete that. And let's just see what the AI version does. Let's see if that does a better version. So I'll be generous. We'll include a little bit of the shadow on that button as well, because obviously the light has hit that button. A little bit underneath there's a shadow area. Let's just brush over there just like that. I increase that just a touch. Generous with this. It likes you to be generous. Then we'll click on apply and see what that does. And obviously the difference now is going to give us 3 different variations. Let's just give it a second or two. Oh, I like that. Here's our variant here. Yeah, can you see how, look, the actual line of the material now doesn't just suddenly end. It knows it needs to carry on. That's what I'm going to go with. So that's what the result wanted. The other little thing here was this little emblem, this little logo here. We've got a lot of texture within this top. So let's just see if we can remove that. Again, I'll be generous with this. I'll brush all the way over it like so. Something like that. And then we'll click on apply. Interesting to see how this one does. Again, because of that texture in his polo shirt that he's wearing. I mean, come on. I mean, look at that. Let's just zoom in a little bit more. Let's go to 200. I mean, look at that. That is mean. It's copied the actual patterns within the shirt. Wow. Okay. Happy days. That's good. Like that. All right. Not much to do on this picture, but I'm going to throw another interaction, another survey in. Let's have a quick look over here. Right. Okay. Do you agree with this? Oh, no, actually, I've done that one. Let's just go for this one. Where is it? Oh, yeah. Here we go. So the question is, which version of Lightroom are you using? So let's just, that should be posted. Which version? I think it is posted. Which version of Lightroom? There you go. Which version of Lightroom are you using? Lightroom Desktop or Lightroom Classic? Let's give that a second or two. Unsurprisingly, Lightroom Classic is kind of pipping the post there. It's kind of coming way ahead, but you know, it's a good amount. 87% we've got of people watching now are using Lightroom Classic. It's obviously been around longer. We get very comfortable with it, but Lightroom Desktop. And I'll be intrigued to know. All right, cool. Thanks for that. I'll be intrigued to know the reasons for it. Is it because that's what you've always used, and when Lightroom Desktop came along and it was originally only cloud-based? Because that was my reason for not using it, but now it's got local storage. I'm just finding it's way better. I don't have to worry about corruption with catalogs or anything like that, but I'll be intrigued. So by all means, use the chat. let me know. I should be checking on that later on. It's just interesting as somebody who's using this all the time, just to see if anybody else has actually shifted. Is somebody in the chat moved recently from Classic to Lightroom Desktop? All right, let's have a quick look here then. So Anthony, let's just retouch on Anthony now. Right, we've done the removing. Let's come out of there. Let's go to the develop. I'm going to zoom in. And again, let's just, oh, there we go, too close. Let's go to 100. I'm going to go to the masking section. And I will go, let's see if it detects Anthony as a person. I think I noticed him say that. I hope it realizes I am a human. Detects him. Let's have a look. And there we go. So there's his thumbnail. I'll click on that. It then gives me all the individual masks, which are going to get more very soon, by the way. Iris and pupil. We'll click on iris and pupil. Create. That'll then give me the mask in here. So what I'll do is, again, my little recipe, a little bit of the exposure, not too much, because the dehaze does a lot for us. So we'll go for that there. Come down to the effects section within the masking. Bit of clarity. You can't beat a bit of clarity on the eyes. And then the dehaze. I mean, look at the dehaze, what that does. It's just phenomenally good when it comes to it. Something like that there, and a little bit of texture. Now, this one here, you'll notice, and it's only us as photographers that notice this, by the way. Can you see the catch light is brighter in the one eye than in the other? So I kind of want to even that out, all right? So I'll do that real simple. We'll just rename this. We'll say this is eyes, the main one for the eye. Oops, so look, rename EYES. I think I'll just kind of bring up some detail over there so that highlights the catch light in the other eye is equal. So we'll just use the brush again. It's just this workflow here is so cool now with just brushes and all these different masks that we've got. So I've got the brush. Make sure my flow goes way up now. I want to make sure that I'm not dodging and burning. I'm just using a normal powered brush. So feather 100, flow 100, density 100. And let's just kick up that exposure just a touch. And I'll just come in and I'm just going to brush over that little catch light in the eye just there. Let's just see if I can make a difference with it. Is that working on there? Is that doing anything for me? Not, oh, there you go. There you go. So now it's kicking in. Can you see I can control it? Again, brilliant thing about Lightroom is it's just all sliders. And we can just, just because we have one setting, it's not set there, we can just adjust it. So maybe even something like that would kind of even it out a little bit. So if we go before, and after. Right, okay, good. Let's go back to the fit section. Dodging and burning. Now, I'm not going to do any dodging and burning specifically on this, but what I am going to do is something that I have a technique in Photoshop called the 2010 technique, and it works wonders for making portraits really pop out of the sort of screen, or especially if you print them, it really does make them pop out. So let me just show you what I'm going to do with this here. Again, it does make use of the masks. And what I'll do is I'm going to create a, let's just close that one down to there. I'll create a mask. Again, it's going to be a brush. And feather 100, flow 100. Let's just first of all put it into place. So I'll increase the size of it. And I'm going to just brush around this part of the face just here. All right, so something like that. So we're mainly talking about just around the mouth, the nose, the cheeks, and the eyes, and just the top part of the forehead, the areas that are kind of like coming forward on the face. Now that we've got that, what I will do is I'm going to increase the contrast just a touch. Let me zoom in so you can see how this is looking. I'll go to 66%. And I'll put it to there. So I'm going to increase the contrast just a little bit. See, just there. Then I'm going to come down and I'm going to go for clarity, bit of clarity, and just a little bit of texture. Nothing too much. Maybe around about 15, 16, something like that. It's very dependent on what face it is that you're working on. The settings I'm using now, you can see here, I've got clarity. I'll probably stay for around about 15-ish, just to keep it nice and simple. And the same for the texture. And probably 15 as well for the contrast. So those three would be 15-ish, depending on the kind of portrait working on, how I want it to look. If I was working on a female portrait that I wanted to give this almost three-dimensional look to, I wouldn't necessarily use the same settings. I'd probably halve them. So the contrast would be way down, 7 or 8. Texture and clarity, way down, something like 7 or 8. It doesn't need to be much, like I said earlier, to have an effect. So that's what I've got just there. Let's just go to fit and let's just turn those off. So before and after, before and after. I don't know how this is going to be coming out on your screen, but the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get another mask. Let's just rename that one. And I'll just, for argument's sake, so people know that it's that effect where it comes forward, I'll call it 2010, just for argument's sake. Then this is something I do pretty much on every portrait, pretty much. Again, I'll get a brush, making sure that brush is nice and feathered and really nice and soft there. And again, I'll just brush around the middle part of the face just here, like this. And I'm just going to get to the exposure. It doesn't need to be much, but just a little bit, just to lift it. Can you see that? If you go too far, it's going to look pretty obvious, but just a little bit of a kiss of light onto the face that you wouldn't necessarily notice had been done. So something like that. So there's before and after, before and after. So that's that. The next thing I wanted to do in this image, and again, I'm racing through this, so I'm really conscious of the time here, is the background. I wanted it to be, although I'd turned those LED lights to be really cool, so it did add a little bit of coolness onto the background, I want to kind of give it just a little bit more, and I can do that really, really simply, really simply. I'm going to click and create a new mask. I'm going to go to where it says background. And click on background. Lightroom will then analyze the image, say, right, what's the subject, what's the background? And the analyzing, the way it does this now is getting so good. I mean, it's even picked up, look here, this little bit down the bottom here. So really, really good at doing that. It's nicely masked out the hair just there as well. And then I'm just gonna add a little bit to this background. And this is how I would also create colored lights. I did it recently in a tutorial showing what the fake effect of having gelled colored lights on somebody. In Lightroom Desktop, we just come down to the color section here, and there's a little tab that says colorize. And if I turn that on, we then get this color little area here where I can click and drag around to choose a color. Now, if you're using Lightroom Classic, you won't see the word colorize, but within that color section, you'll see a little swatch with a line through it. That is colorize. So if you tap on that, it'll then open up this section so that you can then add in some more kind of coloring into it. So let's just go for something nice and subtle, something like that. And I'll take down the saturation as well. Maybe something like that. How's that looking there? What does that give us? Let's go before and after. Again, really subtle, but I like the way that he's got the top on and there's an element of blue in the band as well. So I kind of like that. The last thing I'll do, the very, very last thing. Now you'll notice with this, if I zoom in again on Anthony, you can see that his ear is pretty much in focus, as is the top of his head and what have you. I didn't want that. We were experimenting yesterday with different depth of fields, different apertures to see what worked best for this new kind of look that I'm going for. And we actually settled on f4. It looked good because the tip of the nose was in focus, but then from kind of like here, this area here was starting to go out. But we'd experimented with f2, 2.8, 5.6, and I left the camera in 5.6. I got carried away, I got too excited about it. And if I press I on the keyboard just here, bring up the information, you can see this one here was shot at 5.6. So I didn't want the ear to be fully in focus or the top of the head. So I need to fake it. All right, that's what I need to do. So I'll do that just like I did with Sarah the one before. We'll come down to the lens blur section and I'll click on apply. It'll analyze it. It won't take too long because there isn't much there. There's the subject and background. There's no element in between that it needs to kind of, work out where they are in the depth of the image. Let's just kind of let it finish off just there. Take a few seconds. He says it way long, but it's taken longer than I expected. Look, oh, there you go. Right, so it's done that. Then I will click on visualize depth. So now you can see the background dark, that's out of focus. For some reason, there's a dot on his head here. That's out of focus. So let's just figure this out. What I'll do is I'll come to the refinement section, focus, and we'll just put that little area there in focus. Just brush over that, make sure that's nice and in focus. Then I'll go to the blur section, and this is what I wanted it to be like. So the sort of from the ear line here backwards to be out of focus. I'll get the brush and I'm going to brush up over his ears and just go round the head. And you see it's feathered, it's blending it in nicely. There's no hard edge, so it should kind of give a natural effect. In fact, when I posted this recently on social media, nobody has kind of said, I don't think anybody said anyway, did you use the lens blur? Look, my friend Stephen Perry said nice depth of field, and I took that as a compliment. Let's just take this out of focus as well. Let's just paste on here, because obviously that there, the top of his chest is kind of way back from his chin, so that would be out of focus as well. Have a look. All right, let's go to visualize depth, turn that one off. And, right, there we go. Let's zoom in. So now you can see, look, see how it's out of focus? Nicely out of focus. The ear's out of focus, but the main part here, the face, is kept in focus. So when you see this on your screen, when you do this, if you get the file and you kind of go through these steps, you'll notice it on your screen. You probably don't notice it quite so much on the stream in there, but because you've done that contrast, clarity, and texture in the center of the face, and you've brightened it up, and then done this kind of lens blur effect around the outside, which is so much better in this updated version, it really does give the impression that it's coming forward. So yeah, very, very, very cool stuff. So right, I have gone on way too long, haven't I? Look at that now, and we've got an hour's gone already. So that's that. Let me just couple of things I wanted to mention, actually. I know that I'm sure that WEX code will be appearing, unless it's appeared already, I don't know, but there's that WEX code that WEX have got running for Calibrite products. That's going to be there. What else to let you know about? Oh yeah, at the very, very start, I asked you if there was one thing you could have in Lightroom right now, what would it be? And I saw loads of stuff come in there. The reason I ask you that is not a lot of people seem to know about this, but if I just dive over to my desktop here, there's a web page rather on the Adobe's platform there, where you can actually submit what you would like to see within any particular kind of app that you're using, and you see them all listed down here. Now it won't say Lightroom Classic, Lightroom Desktop, it'll say Photoshop Lightroom Classic or Photoshop Lightroom. So whatever version you're using, click on it. It'll then take you through to a forum, and it shows this is where you can put in your suggestions. Now, believe me, they don't just get thrown into some empty hole and never to be looked at. I know the people specifically who work on the Lightroom teams who do look at these requests. So the more requests they get, especially for the more of the same thing again and again, they get to see what's really popular. And that's when we get to see those being put into the pre-release version, then the beta version, and then eventually we get them. So that's how this happens. We need to motivate them to also, what we would like to be in it, because it's obviously the software that we use. I will be doing some questions. I'm going to try and dive into some questions in a minute. So that's one thing I wanted to let you know about. Another little thing to let you know about was, this one here. Now, obviously, I've talked about screen calibration, haven't I? Let's just go to my Photoshop. I talked about color accuracy. It's all well and good having color accurate, you sort of do your color checkers and stuff, but if you're not looking at your screen that is calibrated correctly and got correct colors, then it's completely pointless. So there are a number of different things that you can get. I just thought it'd be worthwhile telling you, because I do get asked this quite a lot, because I do a lot of printing and stuff. The actual calibration device I have is this one here. It's called the Display Pro HL, made by Calibrite. And I have this one because it is kind of like a high-end one. It's, I do a lot of work on my computer. A color accurate workflow is pretty vital for me as well, because I do a lot of printing on that thing behind me there. So I need everything to be in sync. However, getting your colors accurate isn't just for people who print. There's so many other people that need to make sure that their colors are correct on their screen. And it's kind of people that you might not even think of, like everyday people who use the internet shopping. If you're looking to buy clothing and stuff like that, when you're looking at it on the screen, is that really the color of that top or those jeans or whatever? So you need to make sure of that. Also gaming, if you're somebody who does a lot of gaming, you pay a lot of money to get these games and you want that really immersive experience. You want to be immersed in a world within that game that the original coders that makes that game made for you. So again, color accuracy and all that kind of stuff is important. So you wouldn't need something necessarily like that. And color calibration can be a proper nightmare if you don't really grasp it. That's why there's this device here, Display 123, very, very simple, plug in. The controls you have are very limited. It will calibrate your screen to the color space that you currently have it set into. So if you're using Adobe RGB, it'll calibrate it into Adobe RGB. And the brightness, it'll calibrate it to 120 candela, which is a pretty standard kind of brightness level that you'd want. Not if you're printing, but for general use, 120 candela. So I just wanted to mention that one there, because I'm big time into all that kind of stuff. Right, let's have a look at some questions, shall we? Let's dive over some questions. I'll keep my screen up there so you've got that. Right, question for you, Glyn. What do you think of AI being introduced into photo editing apps? And that's from a guy called Paul. Paul, do you know, I'm all for it. I am all for it to a degree. I'm certain, as somebody who makes a living out of hopefully being creative and making imagery and stuff like that, I don't feel threatened by it in any way, because I think my mentality is that I just see it as another tool. That's all I see it as. For example, there, you know, when I've removed that button and that logo on Anthony's shirt, perfect. I could have done that manually. It would have taken a lot more time to get that patterning and whatever the text on his shirt to be more as accurate as it was in what I did. But I just find it as a tool. That's all it is. I'm not somebody who's into doing compositing like I used to be, where I'd be adding stuff in. But I think when it comes to taking stuff out of an image and other, you know, other things it's allowing us to do, I'm all for it. I am totally all for it. I know that in the in the camera club world, it's all a very, very awkward thing at the moment. But my own personal opinion is that if camera clubs don't embrace it to some degree, they risk losing their membership, because the current membership's getting older. Younger people, AI is just every day. It's what we have. So if they don't embrace it, they're not going to get younger members to join the camera clubs. Okay, so let's have a look here. Are you also using Photoshop lesser now you have more functionalities in Lightroom? That's from Harold. Absolutely, I am. I really, really am. Don't get me wrong. I love Photoshop. I made my name from using Photoshop, but I start in a strange way, and I hope this comes across well. In a strange way, I started to feel like a bit of a trickster in Photoshop, showing certain things. I can do this, I can do that. And don't get me wrong, I love it. I still love Photoshop, but I'm getting a real buzz out of, you know, it's 2024. It's a new workflow for me. You know, it's very, very easy in this whole retouching photography world and what have you to become very set in your ways. I've always done it this way, because that's what I've always done. However, if you kind of step out of that comfort zone temporarily and think, you know, is there another way that I could do this? My God, it's amazing what you can discover. I mean, I always did dodging and burning within Photoshop. I always did my 2010 technique within Photoshop. I much prefer it within Lightroom. The more I can do in Lightroom, the better, because if I get so far into a retouch, at any stage later on, I can go back and change any section of it. Whereas I know that when I was using Photoshop more than I am nowadays, I would invariably do merged layers and, you know, all that kind of flattening and all that kind of stuff. So it meant that there was like a line in the sand drawn there, that if I wanted to correct something underneath there, I'd have to redo loads of work, not in Lightroom. So I'm getting a real kick out doing more and more in Lightroom. I'm doing more with my iPad, Lightroom on the iPad, and I'm really enjoying doing stuff on my mobile. It's just I'm embracing this whole kind of workspace. I really, really am. JR, cool, has put, what is your opinion on removing reflection on glasses? Maybe a class on that subject. Yeah, I will do something on that. I have done, again, it depends how you feel about AI, JR. It really does. There are ways we can do it manually, but it's a long workaround. It really, really is. I've done it using AI, and my God, it can be really good or it can be really bad. But when it's really good, it doesn't half look good. It works a treat. The only ways I remember before, when people were saying, oh, this is how you can get rid of reflections in glasses, and they'd be in books. I've seen them in books. A section, this is how to remove reflections in glasses. And it says, step 1, take a picture of the person wearing the glasses. Step 2, then take the picture without them wearing the glasses, and then mask the two and brush. Well, that's no good. What if you've only taken one picture and you're just stuck with it? You've got the reflections. There needs to be a way of doing it. There are ways of doing it. It depends if you're willing to embrace certain things, and also what that image is going to be used for. Because if it's going to be used in a camera club competition who don't accept AI, awkward, very, very awkward. Amanda has put, can you copy the layers to another image, i.e. background, color, texture, and adjust the masking? Yes, you can. You pretty much can. You create a preset. You can then, when you create a preset within Lightroom, it will save, by default, it'll put a tick on all the settings that you've applied, but it won't put a tick on the masking. So you would need to put a tick on the masking to say to include that. But bear in mind, that, let's say if I'd done the masking on the picture of Sarah and I copied that as a preset and then wanted to apply that onto the picture of Anthony, they're two different people, which isn't a problem, but there's two different compositions. So those masks are going to be in slightly different places. But you certainly could. You could copy them over. You could then just turn on the overlay so you see where they are. You could drag and reposition them, or you can just use a brush to kind of fine tune them. So yeah, you can do it kind of, Amanda. So I hope that answers your question. Roy has put, which version of Lightroom do you think gives you more features and more control over your images? At the moment, I would say the most features, probably Lightroom Classic at the minute. There are things within Lightroom Classic that aren't yet in Lightroom Desktop, and vice versa. There's a couple of things I think that you'll find that are in different ways that things are made in Lightroom Desktop to what they are in Lightroom Classic. And it's quite an interesting question there, Roy, because you do get people saying that they want Lightroom Desktop to have all the same features of Lightroom Classic. Well, then why make Lightroom Desktop? You know what I mean? Why have two versions when they're identical? I think it's clear that the focus nowadays, although Lightroom Classic is definitely not going to be disappearing, certainly for a long time. And I work very closely with the Lightroom team, and I can honestly say that hand on heart, they have not taken their focus off it. But obviously there is a focus on the Lightroom Desktop side of things because of the way that it can work across all the platforms. You'll find that certain things like the AI might be quicker. The actual way the whole ecosystem works within Lightroom Desktop would be quicker. It just seems to be better the way it's. I like it. I really do. Now that they've got the local storage, for me, that was the tipping point going over into Lightroom Desktop. I find it quicker. I like the sort of the workspace. I find it quite modern. I find it very appealing. It's easy to navigate around. Things are snappy. It's quick. When I import images, it just happens. If I move to another computer, I don't have to think, oh my God, how do I move my catalog to that? I don't have to think about it. I just literally unplug it, my hard drive, and I plug it back into my new computer, and it's there. There is nothing for me to do. It's as simple as that. So that's what I love about it. I'll say that I'm conscious of time. I don't know. Can you post the LED lights that you use? Good question, Elisa. I will do. Let me just dive over to here. This is my website, Glyn, real simple, very creative name, glyndewis.com. If you go onto there, I've got a gear page. And if you click on lighting and modifiers, you'll see them just there. These L120 came out 2 days ago. It's a new one, 120 watt LED. I absolutely love it. I mean, I keep an eye on social media and my blog as well over the next few days, because there's some photo shoots coming up where I'm going to be using these this weekend. 2 photo shoots on Sunday coming up, which I cannot wait. I'm going to be doing a behind the scenes blog post about Anthony's photo shoot as well. But they're just brilliant. They are so good, and you can control them from your phone as well. The power, there's special effects in there. I love them. If you're UK based, give me a shout, because they're an American company, and I know where you can buy them in the UK. Carmarthen Cameras. I can put you in touch with Krish, who can get you a discount on those. And if you're anywhere else in the world, drop me a line. I can pass on a discount code for those. So, Elisa, thank you for asking that. And Kate says, thank you, everyone. We don't have time for any more questions. But there you go. Let me stop sharing my screen. Oh, no, one last thing to let you know about. I'm being cheeky now. Just to let you know about. Keep an eye on that. I've got my how to print course coming out for pre-order in the next few days. And the price it will be on pre-order, it will never be as low as that again. So keep an eye on that. And also on my website, let's go back to the home page. For those of you who don't know, every week I run YouTube lives. I also go onto Facebook, and every week I have a superb guest. This coming Sunday, Russell Preston Brown, Dr. Brown from Adobe is on with me, 7 p.m. UK time. But when you go to the website, there are tons of videos here from previous guests. Bert Monroy, my friend Nigel Thomas, Aaron Blaze from Disney, Lisa Carney, I mentioned, Krish from, there's loads of people. Some amazing stuff on there. So please do check those out. It'd be great to see you live when we're doing those as well. But let me stop screen sharing. Is that the button I press? Let's just try it. Oh, stop screen sharing. It's just here. Bosh. There you go. Cool. All right. That is us. That is us. So, folks, look out for your email tomorrow. It's 24 hours later. when you'll get the email come through with the replay. If you want to follow along, go to the Lightroom profile page, my Lightroom community profile page. But folks, I've gone on longer than I expected, but thank you for sticking around. Thank you for making the chat room so active. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Hope you have. Any questions at all, don't be shy. Don't be a stranger. Drop me an email. But again, thanks to Lemesca, thanks to Calibrite, and thank you for Wex for partnering in with this and also passing out that discount. Catch you later, folks.